Welcome to the Tech and Space Leader Show, where we learn lessons from leaders of the next frontier. I am your host, Lisa Dreher, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today, Pat Hedley. She is the author of Meet 100 People and an advisor to a number of early stage startups. Welcome to the show, Pat.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for making time to be here. Maybe we can start by having you give a little bit of background on yourself and your book.
Sure, I would love to do that. So I spent nearly 30 years with one firm, which is a little bit unusual, with global growth equity firm General Atlantic. I started there when they were a small family office, and they have become a multi-billion asset manager over the many years. I spent time both on the investment side, but also firm building activities, including building out their global marketing communications, and then very interestingly, building out the effort that helped entrepreneurs and CEOs with their talent, C-level search, board development, talent best practices. And that's really kind of what set the stage for me meeting hundreds of people. I left there about 8 years ago now. And since then, I've been investing in and advising growth companies. I wrote a book, Meet 100 People. I was inspired to write this book as a way of giving back. It is advice I wish I had had when I was first starting out. It's advice I give to young people and people my age too. And it's advice I follow myself. I could not have created this next chapter in my life, in my career, if I hadn't expanded my network beyond the incredibly deep network that I had at my prior firm. So I am a huge and passionate, not only believer, but practitioner of the idea of meeting 100 people.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, so talk a little bit more about this. What initially inspired you to write it? I know you kind of talked about, as a method of giving back. What else were you hoping to accomplish? And also, how has that message evolved since you wrote the book?
That's a really good question. The message has certainly evolved a lot, and I will tell you why. I mean, world events have changed. First of all, we went through COVID, where the idea of personally meeting people was in a lot of ways impossible. It gave rise to Zoom and virtual technologies so that people can connect more broadly, which is wonderful. And I love technology, but I also believe it's essential to meet face to face. And there's real value in establishing that connection. And then, very importantly, we're in a new world in the age of AI. And I would strongly argue that as technology continues to evolve, and so many things can be done for us with technology, personal relationships will matter even more. People need to connect, they need to collaborate, they desire community. It's essential to look for those things and to develop those skills. Now, my initial inspiration was having seen young people go through the job process. And my first goal was to help a young person who may or may not have done well in school. And sometimes those people who do very well and get a job immediately, while that's a huge win, I actually think they're a little bit disadvantaged because they haven't flexed their networking muscles. And those individuals who might have struggled a little bit academically, and therefore they have to do a whole lot more work getting a job, if they take this challenge seriously of going out and meeting people, not to get a job, but to learn, to get better at having conversations and developing relationships, I think that gives you a lifelong edge. And so the book was written to help people learn how to do that if they don't have those skills already. And I'm sad to say a lot of young people don't. And a lot of us have not worked on those interaction skills unless we're in roles where that's important. A lot of people, if they have a job and they've been a place for a very long time, you may get siloed and you may not think about who else out there you should be talking to. How do you get perspective on what good looks like? How do I find the people that could be helpful to me before I really need to make an ask? And one of the things I've learned, especially with people starting businesses and entrepreneurs, if you have a network and you establish and nurture that network early on, your chances of success will be higher. You will just have a better shot at getting funding, hiring people, getting clients, developing strategic relationships. I could go on. I mean, meeting people allows you to learn is the net of it. And you need that no matter what you're doing and no matter what stage of life. I mean, the real evolution for me has been realizing that while this book is for a younger person, this book is so incredibly important for people mid-career, for people at the end of a job looking to figure out what are they going to do next. I mean, it really is something most people don't think about until they really need it. And it's almost a little too late then. You have to be thinking about it as part of your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as you develop this and just looking back at your career, you spent a lot of time in private equity. What made you begin to start focusing and working with startups?
Well, I did spend a lot of time in my professional role with much larger companies. But once I left there, I wanted to also have an opportunity to work with people who were earlier in their development. And I wanted to make some personal investments as well. So I actually like companies a little bit beyond the startup stage, although I have advised people who are earlier in their business development and in building their businesses. I like it when there is some kind of understanding of what the market looks like and what the opportunities might be. It's a good way to mitigate risk. But I love working with entrepreneurs. My parents were immigrants. My mom was an entrepreneur. I grew up with one. I love the energy, the passion, the absolute, grit that it takes to work in a business and to build a business. That energizes me, and I'm so fortunate to have had a lot of experience in working with people who've done this, to be able to see and to be able to help and assist those who are going through the process.
Yeah, yeah. What are the most common mistakes that you see founders and executives making in building their networks?
I see quite a few mistakes, and I'll give you one story because stories sometimes tell the whole thing. So this young man reached out to me on LinkedIn, cold outreach. We did have our college in common, and having a little bit of something in common actually spurs somebody to respond. If somebody from my college reaches out to me, more than likely I'll respond. And so we had a conversation, and he told me about his business. I gave him some ideas, and then I gave him the Meet 100 People speech, how important it is to talk to people and meet people. A week later, he reaches back out to me and said, I have to tell you this story. I was working on an investor deck for somebody, and I knew that there was an event, an alumni event, the same evening, not too far from where I was. And I thought to myself, should I continue to work on the deck, which actually I found to be more comfortable for me? I would have rather continued to work on the deck, or should I go out, put myself out there, and go to this event? And because of you, I went to the event. I walk in the door, people aren't there yet. I sit down at the bar next to a gentleman. We start to talk. It is the investor he was preparing the deck for.
Oh my gosh.
Completely random. And I think that story is a really important one, because sometimes when you go to an event, you don't know what will happen. I mean, this was unbelievably fortuitous for this person. It was much smarter of him to sit down and have a conversation with his investor than to continue working on the deck. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs like to build, and that is a comfort zone, but they also have to build their networks. And the way you do that is by going to an event that you're invited to, going to alumni events where it's a more comfortable situation because you share something in common, accepting invitations to speak on a panel, doing things that are not necessarily building your business, but you never know how it's going to impact your business. And I will tell you, if you read biographies of very famous people like Sam Altman or Elon Musk, They all did this. They all talk about how valuable their network was and is to this day. Don't expect to get funding the moment you need funding if you haven't started talking to investors early on. Talk to people before you need them. Develop those relationships in advance. It makes all the world of a difference to be able to, you know, go into a room and know someone already and
Yeah.
have a conversation. And then in 6 months' time, give them an update. And then if you need funding, it's a very different story. It's a very different conversation because you're known.
Right, right. So, what's the best way for us to engage with somebody that we really admire, but maybe we've never met before? We don't know.
I think the first step is to have some courage and think about the outreach, right? So many people are afraid to reach out to people who may be well known, or you might think in your own head they're too busy. And you know what? That is very self-limiting. What one should instead do is, if there's somebody that you admire that could be very helpful to you, find a warm introduction. That's step number one. Find a warm way to get to that individual. If you know someone who knows someone and you can be referred, huge difference. And LinkedIn is fantastic for exactly this reason and many others. But find some other way to get to this individual. If you have something in common with them, but once when I was back at my former company, I got a phone call later on at night from a young man whose voice was quivering, and the only thing he had was, "I grew up in the same town you did." And you know what? Because he said that, we had a 40-minute long conversation because I wanted to help him, and he was a young man, and I wanted to like give him encouragement and ask tell him to continue to do exactly what he had done. And we had our hometowns in common. That's sometimes enough, right? So you need something in common. A warm referral is better. And a cold outreach is possible too. And I've done it myself numerous times, but you have to give context. It's not enough to reach out to someone and say, "I'd like to talk to you." It's much better to say, "I watched your TED talk. I read the article about you. I think what you're doing is fascinating for the following reasons. Would you be willing to take 20 minutes to talk to me? I would love to learn from you." I
Yeah,
mean, that sounds like a really good outreach, right?
absolutely.
And it
Absolutely.
works. And this is the thing. It doesn't always work. And the few times it doesn't work, it might be because of your approach, but it also might be because the other person has something going on. They're traveling internationally. Their child just got married. They're busy. Their dog died. I mean, it could be a whole host of reasons that are not about you. So don't take it personally.
Yeah,
Do a
absolutely.
follow up. And you know what? If it doesn't work, move on. Find other people that you can reach out to in this very thoughtful, genuine, authentic way.
Right, right, right. So once you kind of get that relationship going, what is the best way, especially when you're talking about investors and partners? What is the best way to really build those genuine relationships?
The first and most important thing to do is to follow up, because so many people plant seeds and they never water those seeds. They never, write a follow up email to say, "Thank you for spending time with me," and, talk a little bit about the things discussed. Or if said you're going to send an article, send that article. If you said you're going to make an introduction, make that introduction. Whatever it is that was talked about, make sure you follow up. And then keep track of all this. It's very hard to keep track of the number of people I meet. I think everybody, suffers from that a little bit. Keep a list, make a note that you're going to follow up in a month or in 3 months or whatever cadence you decided to follow up in. And in the meantime, keep that person in mind. And if you see something that you think might be relevant to them, a conference, a person you'd like to introduce them to, an article, a book, a movie, whatever it is, send it. Say, "I was thinking of you and I thought you'd enjoy this too." I mean, I do this all the time. I like to read a lot. I read the Atlantic, the Journal, the New York Times, and whenever I see something that's relevant to someone, I send it on to them, and they know I'm thinking of them, whether they've read it or not. That one little step keeps me top of mind. And I think that's an important term to think about. How do you stay top of mind? And is helpful. So you have to approach it with this attitude of generosity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So changing gears a little bit, it seems like AI is everywhere. And I guess what advice would you give to AI founders that are trying to break into the funding networks? And how do they stand out? I mean, everybody pretty much says AI in their pitch anymore, just because it's almost like they need to, right? Because everything's AI. So what do you do in that situation?
Look, you have to find a way to make yourself human to another human, because a human is going to make a decision of whether to develop that relationship, keep in touch, and ultimately provide some funding or not. So I have advice for any founder, but certainly AI founders are in this category. Make sure you know what is going on in your area. And, if you're in the middle of the country, this may be a little more challenging than on the coast where there are big cities. Be a part of, young entrepreneur network, or make sure you have some venture capitalists who are part of your ecosystem. Find ways to be helpful to them. Gather with other CEOs and learn from others. This is one piece of advice that I think is so valuable for anyone in their career. Find people like yourself, reach out to them, and learn from them. And join groups if they exist. If they don't exist, create the groups. Find 5 people that you'd like to get together with. Send out an invite for a breakfast or a lunch, something easy to do, and say, I'm gathering together 5 to 10 people. I would love you to join, and have people come. Very, surprisingly, if you build it, people come. People
Yeah.
are waiting for that connection, but so many people aren't willing to organize it, to create it, to make it happen. And the more you make it happen, the more people think about you, the more allies you have in the world. If you're the node, the one bringing people together, just like in social situations, if you're the person throwing the party or getting people organized, people, know you. And you
Yeah.
have to build that personal brand. You have to have people know you. And the way to do it is by bringing people together, by writing, having a Substack or posting on LinkedIn. You need to find ways to build your own personal brand as well as your company brand. And if you do those things, rising above kind of the masses is going to be, I wouldn't say easy, but certainly more doable, and you'll have a greater chance of success.
Absolutely. So I think you're kind of alluding to how people can become connectors. Are there other ways that people can become those connectors?
Look, the simplest is gathering people, right? And the more and the next most important piece is to continue to build your own network, because the more people you know, the more people you can connect. If you have a limited network at the beginning, it's okay, everybody starts somewhere, but you have to start. Somebody has an inbound and wants you to help somebody else, do it. You never know. Older people do this because, and I get asked often by younger people for advice or counsel, and I say yes. And I say yes not because I'm generous. I am generous with my time, and I would like to help younger people, but guess what, I'm learning too. Young people to me are like windows to the future, and sometimes younger people are afraid to reach somebody who's more experienced because they think, oh, I'm bothering them, or what do they get out of it? They actually get a lot out of it, because and if a young person understands that, that connection is much better. And you know people are willing to give their time when asked the right way, when approached in the right way. And you know human beings do seek connection. I think that's integral to humans. And in the age of AI, it's going to be more important than ever to have those conversations. And to get hired in today's market where it's very hard, it's going to be about connections and who you know and the conversations you have. And if you're a young person in college or business school, meet as many people as you possibly can. The
Yeah,
more people you
absolutely.
meet, the more opportunities you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say we've all been young once, and we've all had people help us throughout our careers. So I think that, as you progress in your career, you want to help those people that are, that are open to being supported. And yeah, so I think that's really valuable. When you think about your book and just the experience you've had yourself, what is the most surprising thing that you've learned in going forth and deliberately meeting 100 people? I'm sure it's more than 100 by now, right?
It is many factors more than 100 by now. One of the things that I learned, which surprised me, and it shouldn't have, and this was actually when I was doing my work in meeting executives that might be, possible hires for our portfolio companies at the time. Sometimes people would just send people over to me because they were trying to be helpful. And at first blush, I didn't know if the meeting would result in anything. And there were a few times I went into meetings, I will admit, somewhat skeptically. Every single time I was surprised to the positive. There's always some value in meetings. And it shouldn't have surprised me, but and now it doesn't ever surprise me. But going in and meeting somebody, you might be a little bit skeptical. Oh, how, what kind of conversation are we going to have? I'm actually very comfortable now in those conversations, and the more people you meet, the easier it is. um, but there are jewels in every single person, and I didn't fully appreciate that early on. And I think if you go in with curiosity, a willingness to learn, so many people go into meetings thinking they have to impress, and it kind of defeats the purpose in that way. If you go in thinking, I'm going to go in and learn from this person's very different experience than mine, and every one of us has a different life experience, but I'm going to go in learning with like genuine curiosity. I'm going to be who I am, and and listen well. I think all those things make for a much richer meeting than you might expect.
Excellent. Okay. So I think we've kind of been dancing around this a little bit throughout this interview. And I'm really curious that if you were to make one prediction about the future of making those human connections in a world where AI is taking on a bigger and bigger role, what would that prediction be?
I think that very interestingly, there will be a divide between those people who can do that and are proactive at making connections and reaching out to others, and those who think it's okay not to do that. I think there's, that split is going to be greater, which is sad. And so I think my message is super, super important to everyone, to not be in the category of those who think that, building a network is not so important. I'm fine doing my work in my home office. This hybrid life is great for me, or my remote life is great and it's sufficient. It will protect me. I will say it won't. I mean, unless you have some extraordinary expertise. And even in that case, it might not. I think human relationships, the ability to spend time with someone, to have coffee with someone, to go on a walk with someone, to and I like this idea too, to stack habits. In Atomic Habits, the author talks about how do you do one thing you're already doing and add another thing on top of it, and that way you're efficient, and that becomes a habit too. So once a week on your calendar, make sure you go have lunch with someone. Actually, even better, don't ever have lunch by yourself. always invite someone, even if it's a virtual lunch. Even if you're in a hybrid environment, like reach out to a colleague and say, let's have lunch together by Zoom. Make
Oh,
that a habit. Like make it a habit to either physically in real life, have a coffee, have a lunch, whatever, or do it by Zoom if you can't do it any other way. Because even that helps build some kind of connection, some kind of human relationship, which is really important.
yeah.
I think human relationships will take on an even greater importance. And those who don't fully appreciate and recognize that, I think, will be at a disadvantage.
Ah, okay. Well, that's a great thought to end on. If someone wanted to learn more about your book or reach out, what's the best way for them to do that?
Anyone can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Pat Hedley. And I'm sure you can put in a link. I think you already did on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. And my website is meet100people.com. It's meet100people.com. And you could see some of my other podcasts if anyone has an interest in my TEDx talk. And certainly the book is available.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here today with us, Pat. We really appreciate it. It was an inspiring conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I enjoyed it very much.
Absolutely our pleasure. And I do want to take a moment to thank GuideForce for hosting these sessions. To learn more about GuideForce, you can visit guideforce.com. And we'll see you next time on the Tech and Space Leader Show.